The rain fell hard on the rusty roofs of Outpost 12, a forgotten trading hub at the edge of the galaxy. Humans rarely came here, and when they did, they were either desperate, broke, or hiding from someone. Ethan Cross was all three. He had been wandering from planet to planet since the Terran War ended, working odd jobs, fixing engines, and sleeping in ship cargo bays, but tonight, something in the air pulled him to the dark alleys near the barter tents. Neon signs flickered in alien symbols, offering everything: food, drugs, weapons, even living beings. A tall alien with 4 arms and silver eyes leaned on a pole and whispered, "Human, you look lonely, need company. 5 credits a night?" Ethan frowned, ready to walk away until he saw her. She was sitting behind a rusted cage, thin, trembling, her blue skin bruised and her silver hair tangled like wires. Her eyes, deep violet, met his for a second, and something inside him froze. She didn't beg, didn't speak, just looked. There was pain in those eyes, but also something strange. Dignity. Or maybe pride. The alien dealer laughed. "She's not talkative, human, mute one. But worth your coin," Ethan hesitated. "What's her name?" "Doesn't matter, you pay 5, you get her for the night." No questions. He dropped the credits on the table, not knowing why, maybe guilt, maybe curiosity. When the cage door opened, the girl stepped out slowly like she expected a strike. She was barefoot, thin as a shadow, her wrists marked with faint glowing cuffs. Ethan led her through the muddy street toward the small rented room, the rain soaking them both. Inside, she stood by the door, still silent, still watching him. He tried to speak. "You don't have to..." But before he could finish, she whispered something in a voice barely human. "Please don't touch me. Just let me sleep." Her tone wasn't fear, it was exhaustion. Ethan nodded slowly. "You can sleep, I'll take the chair." He turned away and sat in the corner, watching as she curled on the floor. He had seen slaves before, soldiers, prisoners, but nothing like this. Something about her felt wrong. Not just her suffering, but the way the world seemed to ignore it. Hours passed, rain tapping on the metal roof. Then in the dim light, he saw something strange. Her skin shimmered faintly, showing patterns that looked like circuitry. She wasn't just an alien. She was engineered. A hybrid, maybe. Half organic, half machine, made for something more than comfort. The thought chilled him. He stood, gently covering her with his jacket, whispering to himself, 5 credits, huh? This place is sick." But before he could turn, she opened her eyes again, her voice trembling. "Why did you buy me?" "I didn't buy you," Ethan said softly. "I rented you, but don't worry. I won't use you." She looked confused. "No one says that." "Then maybe they should start," he said quietly. Her eyes softened for the first time, and she whispered her name, Lyra. At that moment, something shifted in the air, like the universe had taken a breath. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that single word, her name, would change everything. Outside, the traders shouted as a patrol ship roared overhead. Inside, a silent promise formed between a broken human and a lost alien. Neither knew that by sunrise they'd both be hunted by forces beyond their understanding, and Ethan would face a choice: leave her to die, or buy her freedom forever. The night was almost over, but their story had just begun. Morning came slowly on Outpost 12, the light from the twin suns leaking through dirty glass. Ethan woke to the sound of footsteps outside the door. His hand instantly moved to the old pistol under his jacket, but when he looked, it was only Lyra sitting by the window, her violet eyes staring at the sky filled with ships. She had wrapped herself in his jacket, her thin fingers holding the fabric like it was something precious. "You didn't leave," she whispered quietly, her voice soft but full of surprise. Ethan smiled faintly. "You thought I would?" "Everyone does," she said, looking down. "No one stays after they pay," he sighed, feeling a strange heaviness in his chest. "I'm not like everyone else." Lyra tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to understand him. There was innocence in her face, but also deep sadness. It was the kind of sadness that came from years of being treated like nothing. Ethan stood up and poured some water from a metal flask into a cup. Handing it to her, she stared at it for a moment, confused, then took a small sip. It was probably the first clean water she had in days. Her lips trembled and she whispered, "Why are you kind to me?" "Because kindness doesn't cost 5 credits, he replied softly. For the first time, a small smile appeared on her face, shy and unsure. But before Ethan could say anything more, a loud knock hit the door. He froze, his instincts screaming trouble. Lyra's skin flashed faint blue, her circuits glowing under her skin as if sensing danger. "Open up, human," a deep voice shouted. "You've got something that belongs to the Syndicate." Ethan's blood ran cold, he whispered to Lyra. "Hide. Now." She moved quickly, sliding under the old bed, her small frame fitting easily. Ethan opened the door just a crack. 3 alien thugs stood outside. Tall and armed with plasma blades, their leader, a scarred one with metal teeth, grinned. "Where's the girl you rented last night?" Ethan tried to stay calm. "She left. Check the streets." The thug grabbed him by the collar, his breath smelling of chemicals. "Don't lie, human, that one's not normal. She's property of the Syndicate, prototype class. Worth more than your ship, prototype?" Ethan thought, his eyes narrowing. They pushed past him, searching the room, turning over the chair and breaking a small table. But Lyra stayed quiet under the bed, not making a sound, her breathing slow like she wasn't even alive. After a few tense minutes, the leader spat on the floor. "If we find out you're hiding her, we'll melt your bones." They left, their footsteps fading down the corridor. Ethan locked the door and turned around, his heart racing. Lyra crawled out slowly, shaking. "They'll come back," she said softly. "I know," Ethan replied. "That's why we're leaving." She stared at him, confused. "You'd run for me." "You don't even know me." Ethan grabbed his small bag and looked straight at her. "I don't need to. I just know you don't deserve to be hunted." Her eyes filled with tears that shimmered like liquid light. "I was made to please," she whispered. "But no one ever wanted me to live." Ethan touched her shoulder gently. "Then we'll start with that, living." He opened the door carefully. Checking the alley, the traders were already whispering, some watching him with suspicion. He pulled Lyra's hood over her head and said quietly, "Stay close, and whatever happens, don't speak." As they walked through the market, the smell of oil and metal filled the air. Ethan's mind raced, trying to figure out where they could hide. He didn't know how far the Syndicate's reach went. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her here. Not in this cruel place for 5 credits. He had rented her. But now, without even knowing why, he was ready to risk everything to keep her safe. And far above them, in the shadows of the upper decks, someone was already watching. Someone who knew what Lyra truly was. And that human, Ethan Cross, had just become a target worth killing. The alleys of Outpost 12 twisted like a maze built by thieves. Ethan led Lyra through the shadows, keeping his hand near his blaster. The smell of burnt metal filled the air, and sparks from broken cables lit their path. Every step echoed like a warning. Every sound made Lyra flinch. They reached the scrapyard district, where old ships and broken robots were stacked high like metal mountains. This place was silent, forgotten. No one cared what happened here. Ethan stopped near an old cargo pod and forced open its rusty door. "Get inside," he whispered. "We'll rest here for a while." Lyra climbed in quietly, sitting on the cold floor. Her glowing circuits dimmed as she whispered, "They won't stop, you know." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I figured that out." He sat down across from her, breathing heavily, trying to think. He studied her carefully under the faint light. Her body looked fragile, but those glowing lines beneath her skin hinted at something powerful. "What did they mean by prototype?" he asked. Lyra looked down, her voice low. "They built me in a lab under the Syndicate base. I was supposed to be perfect. Part human emotion, part machine control." Ethan frowned. "So, you're half human?" She nodded slowly. "They used DNA from a human woman long ago, someone they said was kind. They wanted me to understand love, so they could use it against humans." Her voice trembled. "But I failed. I felt too much. I refused commands. So they called me broken." Ethan clenched his fists, anger rising inside him. "Broken? You're more alive than any of them," he said quietly. Lyra blinked in surprise, her eyes softening. "No one ever said that before." He smiled a little. "Then I'm the first." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the wind whistling through the junk piles. Ethan's thoughts spun fast. "We need to get you off this station," he said finally. Lyra shook her head. "They control every ship, every gate. You can't run from them." "Maybe," Ethan said, "but I've escaped worse." Suddenly, a faint clicking sound came from outside. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He turned off the small light and drew his blaster. Through a small hole in the metal wall, he saw shadows moving, slow and careful. Not Syndicate soldiers, too quiet, too skilled. A voice whispered from outside. "Human, we know who you are. Open up. We're not Syndicate." Ethan hesitated. aiming at the door. "Prove it," the voice replied. "Name's Kira Vale, Free Systems Network. We've been tracking the Syndicate's experiments. And that girl with you, she's the key." Lyra's eyes widened, fear and confusion mixing together. Ethan looked at her, then slowly opened the door. Outside stood a woman in a dark coat with a visor over her eyes. Two others behind her holding scanners. Kira stepped forward, her tone serious. "You got no idea what you're carrying, human." Ethan frowned. "She's not cargo." Kira nodded slightly. "Didn't mean it that way. But the Syndicate's been making biomachines like her for years." "All failed except her." Lyra trembled, whispering. "Why me?" "Because your code, your mind, isn't theirs anymore," Kira said softly. "You're free, that's what makes you dangerous." Ethan glanced around nervously. "So what now?" Kira looked toward the sky where distant lights flickered. "Now, we get both of you off this rock before they find you. But it won't be easy." Before Ethan could answer, a loud explosion shook the scrapyard. Dust and fire lit up the night as Syndicate drones swarmed above. Kira shouted, "They found us, move." Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand and ran through the maze of metal. She stumbled but held tight, her circuits glowing brighter with every step. The air filled with sirens and fire, and as they vanished into the smoke, Lyra whispered, "Ethan, if they catch me—" "Don't let them take me back." He squeezed her hand tighter, his voice steady. "They won't, I promise." But in his heart, Ethan knew this promise might cost him everything. Fire burned across the scrapyard, painting the metal piles in orange light. Ethan pulled Lyra behind a wall of old ship parts as drones searched the area, their red eyes glowing through the smoke. Kira shouted commands to her team, firing small EMP grenades that exploded in blue light, knocking drones out of the sky. The air smelled like ozone and burning wires, every second filled with danger. Ethan peeked over the wreckage. "There are too many," he said. Kira crouched beside him, loading her rifle. "They're not here for me. They're here for her." Lyra's voice trembled. "I can stop them if I connect to their network." Ethan turned to her quickly. "No, that's what they want. They'll track you." She shook her head, her eyes glowing brighter. "They already have. They're inside me." Before anyone could stop her, Lyra placed her hand on the metal floor. Her circuits lit up like lightning under her skin. Running from her arm to her neck, the drones in the sky froze midair. Their eyes flickering, then one by one they dropped, crashing into the junk piles like broken toys. The light faded and Lyra fell to her knees. Gasping for breath, Ethan rushed to catch her, holding her tightly. "What did you do?" she whispered weakly. "I turned their command code against them, but it hurts. It burns inside." He touched her cheek gently. "You saved us," she smiled faintly, her voice shaking. "I don't want to be a weapon anymore." Kira looked at the fallen drones, her face serious. "She's stronger than we thought. But that power will draw more of them." Ethan stood, still holding Lyra close. "Then we leave now." "Before they bring ships," Kira nodded. "There's a cargo lift near the reactor tunnels. It leads to the lower docks. Maybe we can steal a ship from there." They moved fast through the smoke-filled ruins. Lyra leaned on Ethan's arm, still weak but her eyes alert. Everywhere they went, alarms screamed. The whole outpost seemed to be waking up. When they reached the tunnels, steam hissed from broken pipes, and the air grew thick with heat. Kira tapped her wrist device, projecting a small map. "2 patrols ahead, Syndicate troopers," she said quietly. Ethan looked around and pointed to a narrow maintenance shaft. "We go through there." They crawled inside, the metal walls hot against their skin, the sound of boots echoing close behind. Halfway through, Lyra stopped suddenly, her hand pressed to the wall. "What is it?" Ethan whispered. "There's something here," she said softly. A signal like a memory. Before he could speak, her eyes rolled back and her circuits flashed again. Images filled her mind. White rooms, machines, scientists with cold eyes. Her voice crying for freedom. Then she saw a face, a woman with human features and kind eyes whispering, "You are more than they made you." Lyra gasped and came back. Tears shining on her cheeks, Ethan looked at her. "Worried? What happened?" "I remember," she whispered. "The human they took DNA from, she tried to protect me. They killed her." Ethan's heart clenched. "Then we'll make them pay." They reached the end of the tunnel, pushing open a grate that led to the lower docks. A massive shipyard stretched before them, filled with cargo haulers and repair drones. Kira pointed to an old transport ship. "That one still runs." "We take it," But as they ran toward it, an explosion rocked the deck behind them. Syndicate soldiers poured out from the shadows, their leader stepping forward. It was the same metal-toothed alien from before, his grin wide and cruel. He raised his plasma blade and shouted, "You can't hide forever, human. She belongs to us." Ethan aimed his blaster, his voice calm but full of fire. Not anymore. The battle for Lyra's freedom had truly begun. Blaster fire filled the docks, blue and red lights flashing across the metal walls. Ethan dove behind a crate, pulling Lyra down with him as plasma shots cut through the air. Kira fired back with calm precision, every bullet finding its mark. But the Syndicate soldiers kept coming. The smell of burning oil and hot metal mixed with smoke, the whole dock shaking under the battle. The metal-toothed alien shouted, "Bring the girl alive! Kill the rest." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at Lyra. "We can't stay here." Lyra nodded weakly, her circuits glowing faintly under her skin. "I can help." He shook his head. "No. You already did enough." Her voice grew stronger. "You saved me, Ethan. Let me save you this time." Before he could stop her, she stood up, raising her hands toward the soldiers. A deep hum filled the air, like electricity gathering around them. Her eyes turned pure white, and energy flowed from her body, bending the light. The Syndicate soldiers froze mid-step, their weapons vibrating as if alive. Kira stared, stunned. "She's rewriting their systems." Lyra whispered something in a language none of them understood. Then, in one burst of light, the soldiers' armor short-circuited. They screamed as their own power cells exploded, throwing them across the dock. When the light faded, Lyra collapsed to her knees, her breath shallow. Ethan ran to her, holding her close. "You're burning yourself out," she smiled weakly. "I'm just tired." "I'll be fine." But he could see the truth. Her circuits were fading, her energy draining fast. Kira ran to the control panel near the ship, typing fast. "The transport's online, engines are working." Ethan lifted Lyra in his arms and ran toward the ramp, his heart pounding. They boarded the ship as explosions continued behind them. Kira shouted, "Hold on!" and slammed the controls forward. The ship lifted, shaking violently as debris hit its hull. Outside, Syndicate fighters launched from nearby hangars. Chasing them into open space, Ethan sat beside Lyra, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. She looked up weakly, whispering, "I didn't want to kill them. I just wanted to be free." He nodded softly. "You didn't kill them, Lyra. You stopped them," Kira shouted from the cockpit. "They're locking on us. We need to lose them fast." Ethan stood and joined her, scanning the radar. "There's a nebula ahead," he said, pointing. "We can hide in there," Kira frowned. "That place scrambles all systems. We could lose control." He smirked. "Better lost than dead." The ship dove into the glowing cloud of gas, lightning flickering outside the windows. Inside, everything went dark. The lights flickered and the engines roared. Static filled the air, but the Syndicate fighters couldn't follow. For a moment, it felt like they were safe, floating in silence among the stars. Ethan turned back to Lyra, who was staring out the window. Her eyes reflected the colors of the nebula, blue and pink swirling like a dream. "I used to think stars were beautiful," she said softly. "But I never thought I'd see them this way." He smiled gently. "Now you will, for as long as you want." Her voice grew quiet. "Do you really believe I can be more than what they made me?" Ethan knelt beside her, taking her hand. "I don't just believe it. I know it." Tears shimmered in her eyes, and she whispered, "Then I'll fight for that." Suddenly, Kira's voice broke through the calm. "We've got a signal. Someone's tracking us. But not Syndicate." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Who else would follow us out here?" Kira hesitated, looking at the screen. "It's a Terran ID code, human military." Ethan's heart stopped for a second. If the humans had found them, it meant trouble, big trouble. Because to them, Lyra wasn't a person either. She was technology, and technology always belonged to someone. The nebula shimmered around them like a storm made of light. Ethan stood near the cockpit window, staring at the blinking radar. A Terran signal pulsed in the distance, strong and clear. It wasn't Syndicate anymore, it was his own people, and that made it worse. Kira adjusted the controls, her voice tense. "The signal's getting stronger." "They know exactly where we are," Ethan frowned. "How?" "The nebula should hide us," Lyra spoke softly from the back, her voice tired but calm. "They're tracking my core, the humans built it." Ethan turned, shocked. "You mean your creators were human?" She nodded slowly. Half of me comes from them. The rest from the Syndicate's tech, Kira cursed under her breath. So they'll both want you, one to control, the other to destroy. Lyra lowered her head. Maybe I shouldn't exist. Ethan walked over and crouched in front of her, his eyes fierce. Don't say that, you didn't choose what they made you. But you can choose who you become. Her eyes met his, shining faintly. Then I choose freedom. The ship trembled as a large shadow appeared ahead. Through the window, a Terran battleship came into view, its lights piercing through the nebula mist. A deep voice echoed through the comms. Unidentified vessel. This is Commander Havel of the Terran fleet. Power down and prepare for inspection, Kira whispered. If we don't comply, they'll shoot us down. Ethan clenched his jaw. If we do, they'll take her. Lyra stood slowly, her voice steady. I can speak to them. They might listen. Ethan shook his head. No, they won't see you as a person. They'll see you as a weapon. She smiled faintly. Then let them see both, Kira sighed. We don't have time to argue. They're locking on. Ethan took a deep breath and pressed the comm button. This is Ethan Cross, Terran engineer, requesting safe passage. The reply came cold and sharp. Ethan Cross, you are harboring stolen military property. Surrender the asset immediately. Lyra flinched at the word asset. Ethan glared at the speaker. She's not property. Silence followed for a moment. Then the voice said, You have 1 minute to comply. Kira looked at Ethan. What's the plan? He exhaled slowly. We don't surrender. Kira's eyes widened. You want to fight a battleship? Ethan looked at Lyra, then back at her. Not fight, outsmart. He ran to the control panel and opened a hidden maintenance interface. Typing fast. I used to work on Terran ship software before the war, he said. Their targeting AI has a delay in nebula fields. Kira's face lit up with understanding. You can blind them. Ethan nodded. For a few minutes, enough to escape. As he worked, Lyra placed her hand on the ship's console, her circuits glowing again. I can help, she whispered. I can link with their system and send false readings. Ethan looked at her. Worried. That could fry your neural core. She smiled softly. Maybe, but it's worth it. The lights flickered as she connected. Her eyes turning white again, Kira shouted, Incoming fire! As plasma bursts lit up the nebula, the ship shook violently. But Ethan yelled, Hold steady, just a few more seconds. Lyra's voice echoed through the ship. Not entirely human, redirecting, falsifying. Now, the radar on the Terran battleship went wild, showing dozens of ghost signals. Commander Havel shouted orders. But it was too late. Ethan slammed the thrusters, and the small transport shot forward through the mist. The Terran guns fired blindly into empty space. When they finally broke through the other side of the nebula, silence returned. Ethan turned to Lyra. She was motionless, her circuits dim, her body cold. He knelt beside her, shaking her gently. Lyra, wake up. No response, just a faint pulse of blue under her skin. Kira looked at the readings and whispered, She's alive, but her core is unstable. She burned too much power. Ethan closed his eyes, whispering, Then we find somewhere to fix her. Somewhere they'll never reach. Outside, the stars stretched before them, cold, endless, and full of danger. But Ethan's eyes held only one thought. He didn't care about the war, the Syndicate, or the fleet. All he cared about was the broken girl who chose to be free. The stars outside looked calm, but Ethan knew it was the silence before another storm. He sat beside Lyra, her head resting on his jacket, her glowing circuits now faint and fading. Every few seconds her chest rose with a weak breath, and that was all that kept him going. Kira stood near the cockpit scanning space, her voice low. They're both coming, Ethan. Terran and Syndicate ships. They've joined forces to get her back. Ethan's hands tightened into fists. Of course they did. Both sides want control, not peace. He looked at Lyra, brushing her silver hair gently. I won't let them have her. Kira turned, her expression tense. Then we need a miracle, because we can't outrun two fleets. Ethan's eyes moved to the stars, a quiet fire building inside him. Then we'll make our own miracle. He moved to the control panel and began typing fast. Kira frowned. What are you doing? Redirecting engine power to Lyra's core chamber, he said. If I can sync her system with the ship, maybe she can recover. Kira hesitated. Or maybe she'll overload and take us all with her. Ethan smiled faintly. You don't know her like I do. She doesn't break that easily. He carried Lyra carefully to the engineering bay. Laying her on the glowing console, her skin shimmered under the light, her circuits flickering like dying stars. He connected small wires to the ports along her arms. The ship's systems hummed, the lights flickering as her energy began to merge with the engine. Kira shouted from the cockpit, "They're here, Ethan. 2 fleets, Terran destroyers on the left, Syndicate cruisers on the right." Ethan's voice came steady through the comm. "Hold them off as long as you can." Kira cursed quietly but stayed, ready to defend them until the end. Inside the bay, Lyra's voice whispered faintly, her eyes half open. "Ethan." He leaned close. "I'm here." She smiled weakly. "You're not supposed to care this much." He smiled back, tears in his eyes. "Then I'm doing it wrong." Her circuits began to glow brighter, the hum turning into a soft vibration under the floor. Ethan stepped back as the light around her body spread through the whole ship. The engines roared to life. But something else happened. Lyra's mind linked completely with the ship. Her voice filled the air, stronger now. "I can feel everything, the stars, the ships, the pain." Ethan's heart pounded. "Then use it, Lyra. Show them what freedom looks like." Outside, the 2 fleets closed in, locking targets, ready to destroy each other and the small transport between them. But before a single shot could fire, the light from Lyra's ship expanded, spreading across space like a wave. Every weapon system, every targeting AI froze, their screens filling with her voice. In every language, across both fleets, they heard her say, "I am not your weapon, not your creation, I am alive." The ships began to shut down one by one, their systems overridden. Inside the control rooms, terrified soldiers watched as their own weapons disarmed. No one understood what was happening. Only that one voice, soft, sad, human, spoke across the void. Then the light faded and silence filled space again. Kira's voice shook. "Ethan, she just disabled 2 entire armadas." He didn't answer, his eyes fixed on Lyra lying motionless again. He rushed to her side, holding her hand, whispering, "Lyra, come back." Her eyes opened slowly, glowing soft violet. "Did it work?" Ethan smiled through tears. "You did it. You stopped them." She smiled faintly, her voice gentle. "Then maybe I can rest now." He shook his head. "No, you live now. You begin now." Kira appeared at the door, tears in her own eyes. "They're retreating, both sides. They're afraid of her." Ethan looked out the window, the stars bright and endless again. He whispered softly, "Good. Let them remember." Lyra's hand squeezed his weakly. "Where will we go now?" Ethan smiled. "Anywhere you want, the universe is ours now." She closed her eyes and whispered, "Then let's see it together." And as their small ship drifted into the light of a new dawn, the story of the human who bought an alien for 5 credits and gave her a soul became legend across the stars.